Welcome to Recovered1440.com Cabin Fever, episode 13. Where has the fucking time gone? My name is Bobby and I'm an addict. This is a podcast for people that might be struggling, who are looking for a way out of drug addiction, who may not even know that they're suffering from drug addiction, but to let them know that there is a solution. Me and my friends are part of a 12-step fellowship that wishes to remain anonymous at the level of press. They're not allied with any sect, denomination, religion, politics or any of that shit. But if you listen to the drug of choice, tap that into Google and follow it up with meetings near me, then I'm sure you'll find an abundance of love. I'm joined today by a new friend of mine called Kent. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Just like the normal format, mate, if you'd like to explain what life was like, what you did and what your life's like today, that'd be beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, mate, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
When we talked about this, and I said, look, my message is not about, I've got to tell my story, but it's not one of those, I used to be a drug addict and now I'm not. I'm some sort of legend or whatever. That's not what my message. My message is that healing and recovery is possible, and that if you're out there and you're struggling with drink or drugs, there is a way out. And the reason I say that is because that was my experience. So just very briefly, how was it before? I'll just quickly whistle stop tour through my life. So I'm Australian, grew up in Queensland country. Not a lot of money around in my family, but mum and dad worked very, very hard to put me and my two older brothers into private school for secondary school. There was no drink, no drugs, no abuse, no traumatic events in my life. I had a good upbringing, as I said, there wasn't a lot of money, but I had everything I wanted, and Queensland country, a lot of space, beaches, swimming pools, sport, it was great, outdoor lifestyle. Vice captain of the school, captain of sport, left school, and I threw myself into rugby, so I loved rugby, so I played for Australia at under 21 levels, played provincial rugby, played against the British Lions, many years ago in Australia, and at the same time I was studying law. So at this stage, like, everything's fine, and there was nothing, drink and drugs were a part of my life, but quite minor. And then I went to Oxford University for a year, did postgraduate studies there, and then saw a varsity match. Yes, went to Oxford, saw the varsity match, played in the varsity match, got a diploma from Oxford University, came over here, played for Harlequins, and then ended up in the city as a foreign exchange trader at Citibank. I worked at Canary Wharf. I was there for 18 years and I became a director of the bank. And obviously with what came with that was a lot of money. And, living the high life, living in this apartment on the river up in London. But cocaine had entered my life, and even though I used for 20 years, the last 3 to 5 was completely and utterly out of control, and I literally fell off a cliff. Yeah. So the vision is, here's this guy with all this achievement behind him, the law degree, the rugby, the Oxford. But Bobby, what I realised, mate, they were labels, you know what I mean? They were identities that had happened in my life. And when in my 40s, life got tough. When I say tough, I ended up being in a country I didn't want to be in, with a woman I didn't want to be with, who was my ex-girlfriend, mother of my 2 children, and doing a job I didn't want to do. And my solution was cocaine. My coping mechanism was cocaine. Pride and ego play a big part in my descent into drug addiction, because I just wouldn't put my hand up. My pride, in my mind, I was the guy who got things done. The law degree, the Oxford, the city, this, that, and had properties and pension schemes and superannuation schemes and shares, and everything was there. So I'll beat this. I'll beat this. I've got, that we're all delusional, right? We go, I've got this under control. And it descended to at the end, it was, I was doing 20 to 30 grams a week. I was doing up to 6 grams a day. I was a daily user, obviously. I was doing 80,000 pounds a year in coke. And I say those numbers because just to get an indication of how bad I was. Now I'm saying that I'm sure there's people who are worse, but I lost 5 stone because I wasn't eating. So when I went into rehab, I was under 10, about 14 and a half stone. So I was under 10 stone. So how was it before? It was, look, there was some great moments. I had some great times in my life. There's no two ways about it. But I describe it as 1 minute the dog is wagging the tail, and next minute the tail's wagging the dog.
Yeah, wow.
And I was just beholden to white powder. My life, I'd wake up in the morning and I was gripped, absolutely gripped with a craving, this physical craving. I had to have cocaine. Yeah. And my head was just absolutely obsessing about coke. I didn't think there was a way out. I went to rehab, I had 6 weeks in rehab. I came out, 8 days out of rehab, I relapsed. I ended up at a hotel in Southend, and I just went industrial for 3 weeks. I don't know if I was trying to kill myself or it was the last hurrah or whatever, I don't know. And then, 3:22 a.m. on the clock on the TV in the hotel room, and I just said, I'm fucking done. I can't do this. It is taking a lot more out of me than I'm getting out of it. So and that was the 18th of June 2016.
Well done, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby.
Beautiful.
Mate, I haven't had, and look, we all have to embrace abstinence, which I did, and that was difficult. At the end, I wasn't drinking at all.
No.
My focus, my whole life, which had been really broad and really deep and really robust and colourful, whatever, literally came down to one subject. Yeah. It was cocaine. Yeah. Before I had to deal with the guilt, shame and remorse and embarrassment of doing 2 or 3 lines of cocaine before I could take my kids to school. Yeah. Wow. That stuff's really hard to process, in recovery. And I just realised, just over the years, obviously I've processed my life and thought, for all the things I achieved, when I entered that rehab, I was nothing more than just a generic, drug user. Sat in a rehab crying my eyes out and all that sort of stuff and blah, blah, blah. So I come out of it and I just threw myself into meetings. And the comfort I got from being around like-minded people. Yeah, I never told a story that shocked anyone. Not one, you know what I mean? Because, if you're around drug addicts and recovering drug addicts, there's 1,000,001 ways into addiction. But once you're in addiction, the stories are about the same. Yeah. Self-loathing, self-pity, life slipping away, physically, mentally, spiritually, loss of relationships, loss of houses, loss of cars, loss of jobs, just loss of the, we all sort of end up in pretty much the same space. Yeah. And I went to Vange, Open Road, and on a Sunday morning, I'll never forget it. And it was a seminal moment in my life because, my using in truth was high end in the sense I'm up in the city. Yeah. There's restaurants, there's bars, and there's a bit glamorous, a bit prestige, a bit status, whatever. And I went to Vange and, to hear the raw, street using stories absolutely fucking rocked me. It rocked me, and I realised it was like a real sobering, pardon the pun, moment of just where this stuff can really, really take you. Yeah. And so I went there, and then in the last 7.5 years, I did not go back to the city. I got offered a couple of jobs. I didn't go back. I just made a commitment to be the best father I could be to my 2 children. Yeah, they're now 14 and 11, so you do the maths. 7.5 years ago, they were like 6 and 4 when I went into rehab. A great relationship with my children, and then I got so intrigued and fascinated about how people heal and recover, not just from drink or drugs, but childhood trauma, dysfunctional households. And I saw so many people in the fellowships that had not only restored themselves to sanity, but mate, they were acceptable and productive members of society. And I thought, this is unbelievable. Like that these, I couldn't, heard stories of people who just, grew up in alcoholic families, addicted families, criminal families, and didn't really have a chance. But mate, they've just worked and they've owned it and taken responsibility and got their lives back on track. I just found it so inspirational. So then I went and thought, you know what, it's been all about me my whole life. Everything's been about me. I'm not arrogant, but clearly I was self-centered because of what I did. And I thought, you know what, I want to give back, I want to help people. So I went and studied, I did a 2.5-year diploma, became a therapeutic counsellor, started a website 6 months ago, and now I do all sorts of what I call giving, in the sense of I work at Mind, mental health charity, so I work Basildon there, which I love, helping people for nothing and just doing my best for them. Working with all sorts of different clients. The thing that's really came out of nowhere was I do some stuff on LinkedIn, I do some stuff on Facebook and whatever. And it's funny the energy you put out into the world as to what comes back. I'm mentoring a lot of people, especially people in their 30s. And what I've worked out is people in their 50s and 60s are not going to get counselling.
No.
Well, because they come from that era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Put the shoulders back, put the chest
Chin
out,
up,
dig in, get through it, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas you can say, people can get very negative about the younger generation, so-called woke generation or whatever. But what I'm finding with people, especially in their 30s and 40s, is that stigma around mental health and about putting your hand up and embracing some sort of like counselling or mentoring or some sort of service, that the younger generations are more happy to embrace that. So I'm loving the mentoring, love working with Mind, and just to be honest, my life has just turned around. They say beyond your wildest dreams. It has turned around beyond all comprehension for me.
Love that.
And if you, I don't. Clearly I don't drink, I don't drug. I've had some real revelations around the fact that I'm not brilliant, I'm not special, I'm not special and different, I'm not amazing, the world doesn't revolve around me. But what I'm really happy with and content with, mate, I'm happy with the guy in the mirror.
Love that.
Yeah, I look and go, mate, you're alright, I spend my life in a worthy cause, I'm present and available for my kids. I am absolutely aware that I'm not the father of the year, but what my kids are getting the best of me, whatever the best of me is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, love that.
Like I'm present, I'm available. I pick them up from school. I co-parent, so I get them half the week. So I pick them up from school, drop them to school. There when they need me. As I said, clearly I don't drink, I don't drug, but my whole lens I look through life is a lot different. So I would suggest I'm more compassionate, I'm more understanding, I'm more patient, I'm more tolerant. Listen, I'm no angel, I'm no saint, I make mistakes, I'll make amends. And with my kids, they piss me off at times and I piss them off, but by and large, those kids have got a present and available father in their lives and who loves them. And I say to my kids, I go, this is just me, I'm not this is not everyone's view, but my view is, I said to my kids, I said, look, the best two things I can give you is one, the best education. This is just my take. Best education I can afford. And so my kids do go to private school. That's just my take. I've got no comment to make on any type of other schooling, but that's where they're at. So the two things I can give you is the best education I can afford, and secondly, my love. And to be able, like, Bobby, you know what it's like, mate. When you're in a group of addiction, you're not really any use to anybody, not least of all yourself. And if you can't be the best version of yourself, how can you be of service to others?
Yeah.
So today they get the best of me. Mate, I still sponsor people.
You do, yeah.
Still go to, absolutely, very important to me, sponsoring
like
people,
yeah.
because that keeps me grounded. I read those, I read the literature. I absolutely believe in a 12-step program.
Oh wow, good.
Yeah, because you can get clean and sober, but the 12 steps gave me an opportunity to not only clear out the chaos and carnage of my life, but really to work out who I am. Once I take away all the masks, the labels, all that stuff, that law stuff, that Oxford stuff, that would take away the labels, like, and identities, like, who is Kent?
Yeah.
And I've had, in the 12-step program, working with my sponsor, working with my support group within the fellowships, then going and studying, I've learnt, I've got some strengths of character, but I've got defects of character as well, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. So, mate, I think that's I'd like to think it's a pretty thorough answer to your question. So it was the before and the after, pretty much, wasn't it? Really?
No, I love it. Yeah, it brought up so much for me, like, especially recently. I've been, as a recovering addict myself, all of that material stuff that you were talking about, I've never experienced it on that level of, inverted commas, success that you enjoyed. But I find it fascinating that even, because so many people strive for that, don't they, in today, material possessions or see their worth through what they've achieved and the rest of it. But you've just said that none of that meant anything to you?
No. Well, just to pick up on that, I sat in a rehab, right? So I was over in Halstead. So as I said, this was April 2016. I'm 10 stone. Mate, I had 32-inch jeans. So those that obviously can't see me. So I'm 6 foot. So I was under 10 stone, and I had 32-inch jeans. And when I took the belt out of the jeans, they just dropped to the floor. Yeah. I didn't have any fat. I didn't have any muscle, or whatever. And so that was my physical state. My mental state was all over the place. There was no spirituality. And one night I went to my room. I was on a single bed, and I just started sobbing. Yeah. I started sobbing, and what I realised was that externally, superficially, I had everything, and mate, I had nothing. Yeah. I had nothing. My soul was completely and utterly empty. Yeah. I saw a photograph of me the other day, which was, pretty much unrecognisable, and I was very gaunt and whatever. Yeah. And I was smiling, and I was talking to someone about the photograph, and I said, isn't it interesting? Even in my darkest days, I still had my smile. And then I felt really sad because I thought, that's all I had. Yeah. I had nothing else. No. All I had was just this smile, and how I did not have a heart attack is beyond my comprehension. So to answer your question, mate, I had everything and I had nothing. Yeah. Drugs took me to the doors of death.
It's a great leveler, isn't it? In that respect, addiction, because like you said, ultimately it leads us all to the same place, doing the same things. Yeah. I always find it fascinating because for me, they talk about a fear-based illness, right, that lives in my mind, and from childhood, I recognise it now. I didn't then, but I've always been frightened. Always been fearful and all the rest of it. And there was some trauma in my childhood, not massive trauma, but you sound like your childhood was pretty idyllic in that sense. So, do you have any views on trauma in addiction, or do you believe people are born this way, or?
Okay, so I think a couple of things, right? So, firstly, I think there's 1,000,001 ways into addiction. It doesn't have to be trauma. It doesn't have to be this. So because it doesn't discriminate, right? So here I am, male, Australian, private school education, no trauma as such. My brother died when I was 16. I had a brother who was 18 who died. Oh. But mate, that didn't lead me into addiction. No. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that it doesn't discriminate. And the other thing I'll add to that is that there's 1,000,001 ways into addiction, but as far as I'm concerned, and I can only speak for myself, there's only one way out. Wow. And that's a 12-step program.
I love that, yeah.
Right? That is my belief.
And mine.
Yeah, because I can't come up with, I can't say anything else because I've got no experience of recovery of anything else. So I thought I was dead to the world, right? I thought I'm going to die, right? And you know, I was crying my eyes out in that rehab. Finished there, come out, relapsed, then I threw myself into recovery, the 12-step program. So it's my belief is it doesn't have to be trauma, but when it gets you and we cross that line, I absolutely categorically believe there's no way back, right, to sanity, to a life of not using. There's no way back to that life without help, without the help of another recovering addict. I absolutely categorically believe, and I can't express enough gratitude. We won't, as you said, we're not mentioning the fellowships, but the 12-step program, mate, I cannot recommend it more. Yeah.
See, the thing I find beautiful about it is that it's a spiritual program, obviously, but there are psychological components involved, you know, and those steps 4 and 5, for me, they changed everything. You know, the ability to, we spoke about guilt, shame and remorse, and I'd always, I said before we started, I'd tried, inverted commas, recovery, and I'd get to my step 4, and I'd leave off all of the really cringy stuff that I didn't want to tell another man. Yeah. I couldn't be honest, and then I'd go and use, and I'd think this program's shit, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? But in terms of like the psychological component of being able to share how you feel with another person, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely key. Absolutely key. And this is where I think, you know, any sort of healing process or recovery process can get a little bit difficult for men. In particular, right? Recovery from addiction is difficult for male, female, whatever, right? Okay, but the problem with the difficulty with men is, as you say, a man's got to put up his hand and go, I need help. Now, men find that very, very difficult. And then the next thing you've got to do is you've got to get vulnerable. And you've got to talk about your feelings. You've got to be honest, truthful, and talk about your feelings and emotions. And that's I found it extremely difficult. I don't these days. I don't care anymore. I really don't care.
No, I mean not.
But no, absolutely. It you know, but that's where the juice is. Like once I got rigorously honest and truthful, then that's when you know, it's almost like the more vulnerable I made myself, the greater the growth. That's the way it felt looking back. Mate, I absolutely, you know, I don't want to. I cannot tell you how grateful I am.
You spoke about that again, that pride and ego about putting your hand up and saying, "I'm fucked here. I need some help." You know, and we're so lucky we've been given that, like you said, the gift of desperation, where I had that internal snap. You know, it wasn't funny enough as well. It was in a hotel room, but it wasn't even my worst use up. You know, it was just I'd had enough. And I got to that point where I had to put my hand up. Your life's really turned about face in the sense of how like altruistic you are and giving back and being of service. And what are your thoughts on that? Because for me, I was so self-centered as well. I thought at some point I'm just going to wrestle satisfaction out of life, you know, and I'll have enough and it will be enough, and it never ever was. But I learned that helping others is such a beautiful gift, isn't it?
Yeah, so picking up on that, so I think there's this, I got on this pathway, right? So I go to private school. So in private schools they go, right, we're going to educate you and you're going to get good jobs. You know, so the thinking is you'll get a degree or you'll get some sort of well-paid, powerful job because that's the way to go. That's the message, right? So then I'm at a private school where the expectations are high. Then I go to law school where all these guys are lawyers that are going to, you know, change the world through law. Then I'm at Oxford University, which is, you know, obviously super intelligent people who, you know, you're thinking they're going to go out and be successful. So there's this, next minute I'm up in the city and I'm earning good money and all these influences are jumping in on me. And social conditioning. The social conditioning says, get a big house, get a big car, have plenty of money, wear designer clothes. And if you get that, you're going to be happy, right? Well, fuck, I didn't get the memo. Mate, because I ended up in rehab.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so I think there's... so what I'm saying is we get conditioned to society, and some people work it out early about... I believe life is about love and connection. Yeah. Now, I would not have said that 10 years ago. No. But to me, I've had materialism, and I ended up chronically unfulfilled. Yeah. Okay, now I'm not going to say that I want to be poor and on the streets, and you know, I'm not going to be, you know, like a Mother Teresa type, Gandhi type person. But what I'm saying is that I get great fulfillment today out of giving and helping people. I told you the story about the guy at mine.
Yeah. Do you want to share that story? That's a
powerful
story.
Yeah. So, and the reason I told you, and I'm going to share it now, is it just to demonstrate. You know, we started this podcast. You said, "Where were you then, and where are you now?" And I think this story demonstrates that. So, and by the way, if anyone wants to ask, this young man knows that I've got authority to tell his story. I'm not going to say his name, but so I'm working at Mind, and at Basildon, this kid comes in. He's 17 boy. He comes in 17 years old, and his presenting issue is grief. So I said to him, you know, what's the grief? And he's 17, male, and he said that 2 years earlier, just over 2 years earlier, just before his 15th birthday, he was in an apartment in Canvey, and with his boyfriend, and his boyfriend said he needed to go to the toilet, and the boyfriend went upstairs, and my client was downstairs, and he thinks, geez, he's been a while. So my client goes upstairs, and he opens up the toilet door to be met with the sight that his boyfriend had taken a knife with him, had cut himself from wrist to elbow on both arms, had cut through his own groin, cut through his own knee, and there's blood clearly everywhere, and he died in my client's arms. So my client was just shy of 15 years old. So in the intervening 2 years between that event and seeing me, he had terror nightmares every single night of his life, smashing walls, anger's out of control, throwing the controller to his Xbox everywhere, you know, being very disruptive within his family, isolating, dropping out of social circles, as you can imagine, right? Like you're going to think, of course, right? So anyway, cut a long story short, we did 12 sessions, and we went through a lot of stuff, clearly. And, you know, about session 8, I said, look, how are the nightmares going? And he said, mate, I'm not having nightmares. And I think all of us can relate to the sleepless nights, right? If you have sleepless nights, you're lacking in energy, you know, you can't do life, right?
No.
How would you like to be having every night of your life being disrupted? Yeah. And so that was a really big break for us. I said, how's the anger going? He said, I haven't punched walls, whatever. And it was clear that, you know, he was improving in a number of areas. Anyway, at the end, we talked about him going back to, you know, getting into college and all this sort of stuff. And on his last day, I said, okay, and on his first session, 0 to 10, 0 being suicidal, 10 being, you know, euphorically joyful. On his very, very first session, he was 0. So he was suicidal, right? On his last session, we sat there. It was emotional. It was only 2 weeks ago. It was emotional for me. It was emotional for both of us, really. And I said, mate, you know, no nightmares. Hadn't had a nightmare for 4 months or 3 months or something like that. Getting out, back into nature, playing football, re-engaging with his family. His family had seen a big change in him. You know, that love and connection, which we talked about, right? And I said, okay, 0 to 10, where are you today? And he said, 10. Now, that was his last session. Now, you know, whether he's a 10 or not, he's not 0.
Wow.
Got what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, that's what I mean. So go back to your question. No amount of money in the city, I never had that feeling of fulfillment. No. It moved emotionally in a humanistic sense. Yeah. And the other thing as well, Bobby, is that, mate, how good do you think it makes me feel that I've helped a 17-year-old young man.
Yeah.
You've got to remember this. This is a kid who's had an absolutely, unbelievably traumatic event. And I'm not, listen, make one thing clear. I'm not brilliant. I'm not amazing. I'm not special. But I've just assisted him in some way that's going to give, that he can go through life not burdened by nightmares, not burdened by terror nightmares, not burdened by what had happened. He's still going to, I said to him, you're still going to work through this you still remember this stuff, but you've got the tools and skills. So getting back on point, unbelievably fulfilling.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and to have that gift today, the change from, I was that guy up in the city, at a bank, shiny building, money, this, that and the other, me, budgets make this, you get paid this, da. I could not be any more different, and I'm very happy, very, very happy with the person that I am today.
I love that. Do you think that this sort of stuff's all preordained, that you went through addiction to be able to help other people, or?
Oh, I tell you, mate, listen, I'm firmly in the camp these days of there's no coincidences.
Yeah.
Yes, in answer to your question, I believe, and I've said this to family and friends, I go, listen, who've known me all their life, and they go, mate, wow, you're doing all this different, this is amazing, the change, what you're doing. I said, I believe I had to go through all of that. That's what I believe. Yeah. I believe I had to go through all of that to do what I'm doing today. Yeah. That's my belief.
Gives you the experience to draw on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The counselling, or the therapeutic counselling, where did that come from? Just an idea sparked in your mind and you dedicated yourself to it? And also, what are the modalities that you use, or have you got a specific technique that you use, or is it just an amalgamation of everything that you've learned?
Really, really good question. And this is where the program, the 12-step program, and the people around it, in the fellowships, this is where they just don't stop giving. Everyone's giving, right? So a bloke said to me one day, and he's a number of years, more, it's about 15 years clean sober. So he said, mate, I think you'd make a great counsellor. And I said, I've absolutely got no interest in listening to other people's problems. I've got my own problems, right? He said, no, you really got a misconception here. You've got no idea about the fulfilment of helping, giving. And he said, I recommend you do just go and do this, what they call counselling skills course. It's just a taster. 6 months, costs you £300. I went, I loved it.
Yeah.
Fuck, it's psychology and human interactions and why we are the way we are, and I grew up in Australia and I'm in Queensland country, and you grew up in Essex, and we both end up in addiction. Why does that happen, and what happened, and this, that and the other. Relationship with my father, which I thought was perfect, and I've got no criticism of my father, but he was a little bit emotionally distant because of the way he was brought up.
Of course.
And to understand those dynamics, understanding that I was a people pleaser, understanding that I'm a rescuer, so I started to learn all this stuff, and then I thought, after 6 months, I thought I'll finish this and actually become a counsellor. There's a second part to that question.
Yeah, about what the modalities you use, or techniques, or.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is, the first thing that blew me away with once I started my counselling is how much just talking helps. Forget about modalities, whatever. And with men in particular, if there can be a therapeutic relationship really strong around trust and faith. I seem to have an ability for people to feel comfortable.
Lovely.
So once I start talking, and I go, look, my story was I used to be an addict, and they go, really? And I go, yeah, I was pretty fucked actually. And I tell them my story. That then gives them the green light to open up on all their vulnerabilities. So first and foremost, just to talk. Just to talk about whatever's going on. Give it air, put it out into the universe. Listen, someone who's compassionate, understand. That's the first thing. Modalities, I do largely. I'll lean into cognitive behavioural theory, so CBT. I love thought records, like challenge the thought.
Wow.
So yeah, mate, I think it's for because there's sort of two levels, right? There's everyone has anxiety.
Yeah.
You've mentioned fear today. So anger, fear, resentment, anxiety, right? And so in our days, this thing's a Podetsky thought record. Very, very simple. So simple. Everyone can do it. And basically it goes like this. I've got an event. What's the emotion? I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? I'm anxious because of something, right? So okay, well, with an easy one. I come here today, right? So what's the event? I'm going to do a podcast with Bobby. What's the emotion? Anxiety. So what's the hot thought behind the anxiety? I might fuck this up, right? Because I might not be good enough or something, right? So the next thing is what's the evidence that supports that you're going to fuck it up? And you go, well, I don't know, Bobby. I haven't done too many podcasts. Am I out of my depth or whatever, that sort of stuff. So you got to get evidence on both sides of the fence. Then you go, well, what's the evidence that you're not going to fuck it up, or that that you're not useless or something, right? Yeah. You go, well, I've got a law degree and went to Oxford, and I've driven this car here without having an accident, so that proves I'm not useless.
Completely useless,
right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that Bobby is a productive, acceptable member of society. He's doing this podcast or whatever. So when you rate your anxiety at the start, I might say the anxiety is 70%. Then you re-rate. Then what happens is you put a more balanced perspective on what's going to happen. So you go the event, the emotion. What's the hot thought? I'm useless. What supports that you're useless? What doesn't support that you're useless? And then you go, what's a better perspective about this event? Just relax. I have survived 100% of my bad moments in life, my bad days.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
So, I'm 59 years old and I've survived 100% of my bad days. Am I going to get through this session with Bobby? I think I'm alright. So then you re-rate the anxiety.
Yeah.
And so that's CBT.
Yeah.
So I do a fair bit of that. The other thing about CBT, what you got a little bit careful about is that if there's a really, really core belief underneath it about, abandonment or rejection or something, so you may have to go deeper.
Yeah.
But initially that's CBT. And then transactional analysis, which is just parent, adult, child, and so I do those, but without a shadow of a doubt, with absolute shadow of a doubt, the best thing is just listening.
Yeah.
Just holding space for someone, a safe, confidential, non-judgmental space, mate. That works wonders just in itself, without engaging any sort of modality.
I love that. I love that you touched upon as well, sharing your experiences before another person tells their story, and I try and do that as well when I work with sponsees. I tell them the worst of what I did in my addiction, all that shameful stuff, just purely to give them that ability to be able to share whatever they've got on their plate with me, in a judgment-free space. But I love the idea that, like, I can't live in my head. If I ruminate in my head, it's dangerous. Do you know what I mean? And as soon as I just liken it to like pulling it out into the light. All that darkness I'm just pulling into the light, and it can't survive in that space. Once it's out of me, it's out of me, and that's I think half of the battle. Actually being able to share what's gone on.
Yeah.
So, where can people find out more about you, Ken?
Yeah, so I've got a website, so Ket Break Counselling. If you Google Ket Break Counselling, it'll come up. It's got a website, it's got a phone number. I started 6 months ago. My diary's filled up pretty quickly, but obviously clients come and go. So, Bobby, I know it sounds really corny, but I just want to help people. Seriously, I don't. The money. Do I want to get paid for what I do? Yes, I do. But money's not the priority.
No.
There's not an amount of money I need to make or something. My thing is, I'll be really, really honest with you here, right? I'm 60 in May, and I got this from my brother, who's 8 years older than me, and he said to me, mate, he said, look, if you get to 80, you're doing well.
Yeah.
He said, so you're 60, so you got 20 years to go. He said, when you're in the 70s, your mobility probably not going to be that great. He said, and I said, fucking hell, this is a pretty dark conversation. And he said, no, my point is, get living.
Yeah, wow.
Get living.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to do something, and I said, I do want to do something. I want to help people. So as a result of that, I've got energised and I'm amped up, as you can tell.
Yeah,
I get amped up to, I want to say to people loud and clear, you can recover. You can, recovery is absolutely possible. Now, not everyone gets it because that's the nature of addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I'd urge people to do, get brave, get courageous, put your hand up, own it. Okay, so I say to people go, you know, might have, I heard this from a lady and she had childhood trauma, child abuse. And she shared, I couldn't believe her share. It was so inspirational, right? And I went and spoke to her after. I said, God, you're brave. And I said, that story about, you know, sexual abuse and da. And she said, listen, you know, we are not responsible for what happened to us, but we are definitely responsible for our own recovery.
That's beautiful.
And I thought to myself, you are one super powerful woman. And that is an amazing message, because we can all sit there and blame what happened. Yeah. You know, if you had my girlfriend, you'd be fucking using coke, you know, all that sort of stuff, and blame. Work was stressful and whatever. No. Don't point out. No blame. Stand up. Take ownership of the future. Take ownership of recovery. And that's my message to people is healing and recovery is definitely possible, but you've got to get courageous and you've got to do some work. You've got to be committed to do it.
That's what I see, because I think you've just answered the question, but I was going to say about, because people go to a meeting and they might stand outside, they might be dithering, shall I go into this meeting, I'm fearful, I'm all the rest of it. What would you say to someone who's on the sort of precipice of going to get help?
Right, the first thing I'd say is I've been there. I've been there. For all that stuff I achieved, I was standing outside. I'd go to these meetings and I was so amped up with nervousness and anxiety, right? But basically that's a question of, to what lengths will you go to? To what, if you've got the gift of desperation, which I had, and you had, because you went into the meeting. You went into the meeting.
I banged on the door, it had already started, I needed to get in now. I don't know where I would have been if I hadn't got in that night.
So for me, first thing is, it's normal. You're going to be anxious. You break it down like this, right? Why are you anxious? Never been in the meeting before. And this meeting's talking about being honest and getting vulnerable. And this is really, this is really making me feel very, very uncomfortable, right? So we've all been there, and I urge you, just be brave. I'll tell you for why, right? What I found was, once I got brave and courageous and just metaphorically opened the door to recovery, I got met with love.
Beautiful.
I got met with love, and I could not believe it. These people didn't know me. We could not have had any more different backgrounds, right? And all they wanted, mate, you okay? Would you like a cup of tea? Mate, you're in the right place. I remember when I was relapsing early doors, and these guys were saying, you keep coming back, I promise you, you're going to be all right. But you've got to keep coming back, right? And I remember once as Dave, the old Dave, fuck me, it was amazing. I went to a couple of meetings, I went to Australia for a couple of weeks because my mother died. Not a couple of meetings, a number of meetings. I was about 3 months clean and sober, and it was Vange at Vange meeting. And anyway, I went there and I went to Australia quickly because Mum died quickly, and my phone wasn't taking any messages from the UK. It wasn't set up that way. So when I flew back from the funeral, my mother's funeral, I hit the ground in London. My phone just went off, and there's a load of messages. And Dave had left about 4 or 5 messages going, Kent, are you okay, mate? Even if you've relapsed, please keep coming back. You're going to be okay, mate. And I'm thinking, like, couldn't believe the love.
Yeah, love
I
that.
couldn't believe we got each other's backs.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what your background is, no matter, you know, how intelligent, not intelligent, wealthy, not wealthy, whatever background you've got, if you have a desire's massive. If you've got a desire to change, that you will be enveloped with love, support, compassion, empathy, sympathy. You'll never, ever, ever have to be alone ever again.
Do you know what? I think that's an absolutely beautiful point to leave it, Ken. Thank you
Great.
so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Today, mate. God bless you.
Top man.
We may refer to the source by different names: God, a higher power, the Holy Spirit, or perhaps the cosmos. This source is the entire universe, the unified field, everything that is beyond the perception of the five senses.
Just received in our news, and further details of this continuing story. Just received in our